Welcome, I'm Simone Curzi and this is a short pill on how to use Threats Manager to prioritize the threats generated by Microsoft Threat Modeling Tool 2016. So, let's start by discussing the most important elements of the interface that you should consider. In the status bar, you can see the number of threads that you have in your model. In this sample, we have a model that has been just generated, so we have no threat mitigated. Typically, prioritization is done before doing mitigation, so this is a normal situation. On the right part, on the right side of the status bar, you see a completion bar. This bar shows you the status of your activity, how much you have completed your mitigation activity. This is useful when you do actual mitigation. So, let's discuss the configuration in this case. Edit options. Now, to consider the most important parameters for prioritization for you are within the properties, and in particular you should focus on the priority property. The priority property is the property that is used to identify the priority for the threat, and this is what is used to evaluate the order, essentially, that you need to use to mitigate the threats. In this list we have only the priority, even if there are many priorities defined. This is because the priority must have a specific characteristic. In fact, priority is an enumeration and must have a limited number of values to be selected here. The numbers that we have, 4, 2, 1, are used to define the sequence, the priority. So, if you have a threat that is high, it will be assigned 4. If it is medium, 2, and low, 1. That considered, let's see how it is used, this information, by the prioritization engine. So let's open, for an example, one threat type. We have 10 threats in this case. Each threat has assigned a priority. We can, if I click one, I can see that in this case the priority is high. When we start, every threat has a high priority typically. But in this case, the item, the threat has not been changed. We have changed by that is undefined and modified at is undefined. What does it mean? It means that essentially the priority that we have set is not reliable for us. Therefore, the system doesn't know essentially if it is only the default or if you have specified something. To ensure that the value is considered by the prioritization engine, you have to change the row. For example, you can put the row to needs investigation, and at that point it will be considered. Even if we return to not started, we have the value that is changed. Now, at this point, we can essentially select each and every row, and we can do a smarter touch of each item, smarter than changing the status. It is in the edit menu, and if we select set threads as modified by selecting this voice in the menu, or if we click Ctrl Shift M, then every row will be touched. At this point, all rows in this thread type will be considered set will be considered updated. So for each row, the priority has been set to high. What does it mean? It means that the prioritization can be applied and it can be evaluated for the thread type. The prioritization, essentially the prioritization engine, changes this number and it puts 1 at this point. Why do we have 1 and not, for example, 9 or 10? Because the number that we have here describes the sequence. This means that the first thread type to be considered is the one that has 1 as marked as 1. Let's do another example. If we have here, we put priority to medium, for example, and we copy this configuration to everything, you have seen that we have 2. Now, the prioritization exercise at this point consists in going in each and every row, in each and every thread type, to seek, to analyze each and every row here, and to decide the priority that must be set. Now, the correct way to do this exercise is to consider the different characteristics of each thread. The thread, even if they are of the same type, they have different characteristics based on the flow that is interested. So, in this case, we have some threads that are associated to external interactors. This is a very important information for us, because every time we have an external interactor, essentially we have some a subject that is less trustworthy than anything else. Other information, other characteristic, other factors that must be accounted for when we prioritize are the probability of the attack if we have something that comes from internet or if it requires the adoption of a browser or of something that is easily available, then essentially we have an higher probability. On the other hand, if we have something that is not exposed, is very internal and requires some application to be written, some protocol to be understood, then the probability is lower. Another important factor is the impact, meaning that not all the attacks have the same consequences. We can have an attack that can cause an important damage to your system. In this case, the impact will be important. So in this case, just to be very fast and simple, let's mark all the threads that have an external interactor with the gray, and let's leave all the other threads unmarked. At this point, I can adapt, I can change, for example, the priority to I in this case, and to do that, I can simply set this thread to modified, and the other threads I can put to medium. So I can apply to everything but gray and blocked, and at this point I have all medium. So I have applied a very fast prioritization by doing this simple exercise, and in this case the prioritization will be 2. So essentially I have to continue doing this prioritization activity for each and every thread type, and at that point I will have finished my exercise, my prioritization exercise. So thank you for having seen this build, and see you next time.